Hello, I'm Reverend Michael Mugford. I'm part of the ministry team at Cole Harbour Woodside United Church, along with the Reverend Krista Elizabeth Wynne. In these days, as we begin to see things open up again, as we have flattened the curve of COVID-19 here in Nova Scotia, I had to cast my mind back to when things began in early to mid-March, and we began to see things closing down, and we wondered as time went on how we would ever come back to any sense of normal. And in that time, I think the thing that I missed probably the most in the last number of months was worship services that we traditionally held over the course of Holy Week with some of the churches from Cole Harbour. We shared worship together with our Anglican, Baptist, Presbyterian, and Roman Catholic brothers and sisters as we approached the most important season of the Christian faith. In such an opportunity to show how much we are alike in Christ, that in Christ there is no east or west. For many people, including those in the church, Advent and Christmas is a high and holy season, but it is Holy Week and Easter which is foundational to our faith. And while the birth of Jesus is indeed a wonderful celebration, Easter is the place in which we say our Christian faith truly began. It is the resurrection that defines us as a faith. We need that foundational event to help us to understand where we come from, who we are now, and to inform us how we are called to be in the near and in the distant future. But how do we determine that? We do that by examining the places in which we need resurrection as a faith and as individuals. Why do we need resurrection? That question was put to a number of theologians and preachers to answer in a blog post of 100 words or less a number of years ago. And when I read that post, I could identify with so many of the ideas put forward. But the reality is that each one of us needs to figure out why we need resurrection as individuals. When we read Matthew's Gospel and the account of the women going to the tomb on Easter Sunday, Professor Elizabeth Johnson wonders what the women were thinking. The story of Matthew's Gospel tells us that Pilate had permitted a guard of soldiers to make the tomb of Jesus as secure as possible, and they set a stone and a seal in place. So when the women disciples go to the tomb, they know that there is a Roman guard there, that there will be a seal on the tomb, and then that stone will be a huge object for them to overcome. So what were they thinking? What did they think that they would find? What did they hope that they could do? We can all likely think of times when we were faced with an impossible situation, when we were stymied by what to do. But we pushed ahead anyway. That's what I think that those women disciples were thinking. Those women went to the tomb needing resurrection. Not necessarily just thinking of a bodily resurrection, but a resurrection of some sort in order to do the grieving that they needed to do, because the ground on which they had stood for so long as they followed Jesus was now shaking. And in Matthew's Gospel, that's literal as well as figurative, as the stone has rolled away by a great earthquake. Elizabeth Johnson also writes, the earth-shaking news of the resurrection is unsettling, even frightening. It shatters all of our human attempts at security, and it jolts us into the unfamiliar territory of God's new creation. In Jesus, the reign of God breaks open everything that seemed fixed and immovable, even death and stone-cold tombs, she writes. And that's why we need resurrection. When it seems that COVID-19 and the pandemic will never end, when it seems like we will never get agreement on how to deal with climate change, when too many instances point to the fear of the reality of violence against so many people, when those who express that Black Lives Matter are met with violence and tear gas, when violence and hatred of the LGBTQIA plus two-spirit people continues, and when xenophobic white nationalist ideology tries to become the norm when we know it is not, when we're concerned more about corporate welfare than people welfare. In all of these instances in our lives and in our society, that is when we need resurrection. We need resurrection to break the seals on the tomb, to let life and love loose on the world. Easter and resurrection isn't something we remember. It is something we live and we breathe. Resurrection is transformation. By all gospel accounts, the post-Easter Christ is not the same as the living Jesus that people had encountered. This post-resurrection Christ will shape us into new people who will not be the same as we were before, for we will have experienced the transformative power that is resurrection in our lives. And that's good, because we need resurrection. And as we begin to come out of this time of COVID-19 and we begin to be able to do more things than we could not do before, my prayer is that we will hope and we will find and we will see the places of resurrection in our world, and that we will work towards the changes that are needed so that we don't go back to the norms, we don't go back to the tombs, but we go back to new life. Just some thoughts. Peace.